Hello, welcome to part 2 of Google Earth for Prosecutors. I'm Jim Simpson. What I hope to do now is get into some of the less basic, I guess, more interesting things of Google Earth, things that are a little bit more fun, a little more useful. So, we're going to start off, we're going to talk about lines, show you how to do some complicated diagrams with lines quickly and easily. We're going to talk about icons. Some of the icons you can see here, the 7-Eleven, little hoodie jacket, my representation of cell towers. I'm going to show you how to make custom ones and get those looking like things that they're meant to represent. We're going to spend a good bit of time talking about overlays, a number of different types of overlays. The overlay in this image would be the yellowish circle around the cell tower demonstrating the azimuth and things like that for cell tower cases. Overlays like the compass rose in the center, which you'll find real useful. Show you some other things that you can do with overlays. I've got sort of replicated pavement here, situations where you've got cars or automobiles or things in the satellite photograph and you don't need them to be there. So you need to get rid of them, or in this case cover them up. Overlays are helpful for that. And then finally I'll show you a pretty quick and easy way to create your own street names, which is you'll find real useful even if you're not using the Google Earth program itself in trial. Just the street names that Google throws on there are oftentimes sort of hard to see, especially if you've got a witness that's up on the stand and you're using a projector and they're far away. It's easy to have them illustrated pretty clearly so that your witness knows exactly where you're talking about, where you're indicating to. We're going to get into some 3D images. Going to show you how to add 3D models here. We're not going to get into creating 3D models at this point. I'll do that in a later series. For example, we're not going to get into using 3D buildings because those are something that you need to create in a separate application called Google SketchUp, which is also free, but something that deserves enough attention that I'm going to wait and do it, give it its own class. So we'll create 3D models like or import 3D models anyway. I'll show you where to get them and how to put them in here, and like the people and the individuals and things like that. Finally, just sort of some practical things at the end. I'm going to show you how to create exhibits. So once we have an image that we like, or something that's going to make a good exhibit or a good demonstrative, I'll show you how to obviously take it off of here and either print it out or save it to a digital file that you can use. I'm also going to show you how to save your scene, basically, once you've laid down a bunch of points, lines, polygons, 3D images, whatever it is. I'll show you how to save that and export it, which can be real helpful so that you're not reinventing the wheel if somebody's already plotted certain things, like for example all the cell phone towers in California. You can simply get that from somebody else rather than recreating it. So anyway, I'll get right to it. We'll start with the lines. I showed in the first series basically how to create sort of lines, and oftentimes you'll have to create lines in sort of city jurisdiction, along roads and stuff, and that's real easy. But sometimes you have a situation where your defendant or your suspect has traveled a great distance, say from Fresno to Bakersfield or something, and you need to create a path or a line showing his point of travel. And if you were to create a line like the one that you see right here, traversing Highway 58, it would take you a ridiculous amount of time if you were to go through every single curve. There's an easier way. What we're going to do, and I've already done it, is you're going to drop two icons down. You're going to drop a start point and an end point. My end point is, there, it just came up. And you know how to create basic icons. We did that in the first series. So you're just going to drop two down, name one start and one the end, and those points are going to represent the start and the end of your line. And then all we're going to do is we're going to come on over to our first point, our start, and we're going to come and go directions from here, and then we go to our end point and we go directions to here, and we'll see what Google Earth does is not only give us directions, but it gives us a nice line or a route that we can then use. We can just take that route and we can drag it down here. We'll get rid of our directions, and then we can modify that route however we choose. We can change the color and the size and the view and things of that nature. I should mention real quickly, um, after I did the directions, I dragged that route down. I'm using an older version of Google Earth for reasons that I won't get into, but in the newer version, they actually have a little button that pops up that says, hey, you want to make this a path? And so it makes it even easier, but in the event that you're using an older version, that's how you would do it. So anyway, our path is created for us, and we can do what we need to. Saves us a whole bunch of time. Obviously, we can also modify this path to save to suit our interests. What we need to do when you modify a path, obviously we need to have the properties open. And once the properties dialog is open, you'll notice that if I drag the cursor over certain areas of this line, you maybe, I don't know if it'll show up on your screen, but there's little tiny dots that represent where the line changes. And you'll notice that my cursor changes when I drag it over. And when it changes, that's an indication to me that I can modify that line. And so I could bring it to the end here and modify that. Now suppose that I wanted to add a line segment to it. What's important to recognize is that Google Earth looks for the last line segment that you clicked on. Okay, so if I want to add a segment to this line and I want to tack it on at the end here, I'm going to come and just select that, just so Google Earth knows, okay, this is what I want to work with. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to click the mouse again, and it will add another line segment. And I'm left clicking right now. If I want to delete the lines, I'm just going to right click, and so I right click again, and it will continue to delete line segments. So that is essentially all there is to it for the lines. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so moving on, icons. For the cell towers here, I've used one of the default Google Earth icons, but we don't have to use those. We can use anything that we want. So, for example, if I were to come down here and say this cell tower right here, I can make that icon anything that I want. The way that I do that is I open up the properties dialog, and I come in here, and you'll see Google's selection of really sort of pedestrian icons. If I want to use my own, I'm going to come down to add custom icon, and then I'm just going to browse to any location of my computer where there's a graphic I could use. So if I were to come into our training folders and select resources, which is a folder that I've dumped into this folder. So if you found the video that you're playing, just go to where you found the video. There's a folder in there called resources, and what I've put in there is basically all the icons that I've used throughout the course of using Google Earth. And so you can come in here, just for example, and you can change that icon to, you know, anything that suits your needs, really. So I select that, hit OK, and once I hit OK, we have a big red box, and the reason for that, I suspect, is that the color is set to red, which I don't want. I want to set it to white, and once I do that, there we go. Then we see our icon, and of course I can resize it as I need. And there it is. And maybe I want to enlarge it just a little bit more. Okay, so there it is. One of the important things to notice with respect to icons, and this goes for overlays or really kind of any image that you're going to use in Google Earth, is that when you load a new or a custom icon in, Google Earth takes note of the location of that particular image, and it remembers it, which is kind of a big problem if you start moving those images later on. Let me just give you an illustration. Let's suppose that we drop a new icon down here, and we modify it. We use a custom icon, say this one, our chevron. Now Google Earth sees that, you know, when we navigated, when we browsed and navigated through and found the chevron icon, Google Earth made a note of that location. Now suppose later on I come around and I delete that chevron icon, or let's just say I move it someplace else. Okay. It hasn't done it right now, but when you shut Google Earth down, even if you save it, what will happen, instead of the chevron icon, what I would get is something that looked like this. Okay, I'd get a big X, and basically that's Google Earth telling me, hey, I'm looking at the direction that, or the place that you told me this icon existed, and the icon isn't there anymore. So why do I mention that? I mention that because it is very, very important that once you start using custom icons, that you put them in a place that they're not likely to move. What I do is I create a folder on my computer. I'll just show you, called icons, and for Google Earth, and I keep all the icons there, and I try not to ever move them, because if I were to move one of these folders, change the directory, all of a sudden when I brought up my case, I would start getting a whole bunch of X's rather than the icon that I expected. So what does that mean for you? What I would recommend is that when you come into resources, and you'll notice I've put a bunch of icons in here that I've used, and I've organized them based on sort of logical categories, and you'll find a lot in here that are useful. What I would recommend is that you don't use them directly out of this folder that's on the server. Instead, I would recommend that you come into Google Earth and you right click on it and you copy it, and then you just paste it to some place on your computer that it's not going to move, and you keep it there and use it as a repository. And that way you don't run into that problem where Google Earth can't find the image that it's looking for. Okay, so suppose that you're in here and there's a lot of icons, but you don't find an icon that is precisely what you're looking for, which is very likely to happen. The place that I would go is to Google. You're probably using Internet Explorer. I use Google Chrome, so it may look a little bit different, but Google's going to look the same. Come to Google, and if you search for an item that would represent something that you would want to show, it'll give you a list of websites. But if you come to images, it will give you plenty to choose from. And you can look up at the top here. Well, it doesn't do it anymore. It used to tell me how many results it came up with, but take my word for it, it's a lot, and you can find an image that represents just about anything you could possibly imagine. So if we want to use this as our icon, we're just going to left click on it and then come to view image, and now if we right click on it, we can save image as, and we'll save it just there for now, someplace that it's not likely to move. And then if we come here and we browse to that location, we find our icon, and there it is. Now I was saying icon, and that was kind of tricky because that's actually an image overlay, but we could do the same with an icon, and there's our image. So speaking of image overlays, you'll notice right off the bat the difference between an icon and an image overlay. They're very similar in that they both involve pictures and you modify them the same way, but as I zoom out, the behavior of each is very, very different. The icon, which is on the right, is always going to stay the same size regardless of how near or far I am from that particular area, while the overlay is going to mimic the footprint of the satellite photography. So image overlays are real helpful in situations such as if I want to show the reach of a particular cell phone tower. Another instance where that's true is our compass rose here, which is real helpful. So if I were to create something like this, say I'll just create it. what I would do is, first of all, with respect to the compass rose, I'm going to come up here and go show navigation always. And what that's going to do is put a little directional up here, which, if you like, is a substitute for the compass rose. I just don't really like it. Anyway, if I double click on the north, it'll zero it out. So if I get all misdirected, I can double click and that'll zero me out north, which is real important for the compass rose. So if I were to come in here, I just click the button for a new image overlay, and I can title this, and then just like the icon, I'm going to find something an image to stick in there. So if I go in the overlays folder, you will find some of the things I showed in the earlier tutorial, the grid and some other things that are useful. But we'll use the compass rose. I'll stick it in there. I don't need to change its direction because we're already facing the right direction, but if I needed to, I could do that by clicking on this little box on the left hand side here, and that will allow me to change its direction. I can also resize it by clicking on the corners and dragging it. You'll notice when I drag it, I can resize it out of proportion with the original image. In other words, I can squish it, which is helpful sometimes. It also can be a real pain in the butt. Maybe I want to drag it and I just want to resize it proportional. If I do that, I'm going to hold down the shift key, and as I drag it, it will drag it proportionally. And we'll put that someplace else. And then one of the things that I want to do is I want to change the opacity a little bit, just so that you can kind of get a sense for what's underneath it. The other thing that I pointed out that you can do with overlays is you can create fake pavement, which is real helpful. So in the parking lot here, I had a whole bunch of vehicles that were lined up here, and as much time as I was spending with the jury on this particular area, it would have just confused things for me to have my three-dimensional cop cars there and then a whole bunch of other vehicles parked in there. You can tell it's really obvious that I covered it up, but you know, it does the trick, and I think that, or at least I like to think that juries will forgive us for little things like that, and just makes it easier to focus on exactly what we're looking at. So finally, one of the things that I'll use overlays for regularly are streets, and this is helpful, as I mentioned, because I'm just sort of dissatisfied, first of all, with the way that Google labels its streets, and second of all, if you're so ambitious as to attempt to use actually the user interface of Google, the Google program, in court as opposed to just creating static exhibits, chances are you won't have the internet. At least you shouldn't have the internet. I'll get into reasons why that is later on, but and yet if you don't have the internet, the street names will not populate, and so you need some mechanism to indicate to the jury and the witnesses what streets we're on, and so they're real helpful to create street signs. And one of the things that I've done is, if you go into the resource folder and come into streets and roads, you'll find not only a bunch of JPEGs or PNG files that can be used for icons and overlays in that regard. You'll find a PowerPoint template which I've made, and if you open that up, what you can do is you can come in here and create your own. Once I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click and draw a box around my image. That'll select everything, and now if I right click, it'll give me the option to save it as a picture, and so I can do that and save it in a location that I know it'll stay and that I can find it. And then when I get out of PowerPoint, if I come and I add an image overlay and I browse, I will find the image that I had just created, and I can do all of the things with it that we talked about earlier, including adjusting the opacity and anyway, sort of a nice tool, and makes it real easy to create those street names for your scene. Oh, so we've done lines, image overlays, icons, 3D stuff. I had mentioned earlier we're not going to get into creating the buildings because that involves creating your own 3D objects, which is a little bit tricky, but not too bad once you sort of understand the basics. Right now, however, I'm just going to cover how to import these 3D objects, and there's a really great resource. If you come back to our web page, you go to Google and you browse or you search for Google's 3D Warehouse, you will find an enormous database of three-dimensional images that you can import into Google Earth. And like the images that we had searched for earlier, they've got everything imaginable here. And I use this most often when I need a vehicle of some kind. And more often than not, they have the make and model that I'm looking for. They don't always have the year, but you're not going to get that close or create an exhibit that's that focused in that it's going to make any difference. And so you can search for just about anything, any kind of car or anything. We'll do something a little bit more interesting, because why not? So you can see obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff that's come up right off the bat. You can just kind of search through here until you find one that looks like something you would add. So just to show you how this basically works, we're going to come to download model. Yeah, you'll notice that there are a bunch of different formats that I can download it in, and the same formats are not available with respect to every single model. For purposes of this lecture right here, you're going to want to download the zip file. I'll show you later how to work with the SKP file, but that involves SketchUp. So right now we'll be looking just for the download, the zip file, and we're going to save it again to a place that we can find it later on. And if we go to that place, we'll see the zip file. And what we want to do is we want to try to open it, and when we do that, everything looks well and good, but the stuff is, because it's a zip file, it's actually compressed. So what we want to do is we want to come up to extract all files and save that to a place that we can find it. And now these are items that we can work with. So if we're in Google Earth and we go to resources and we come back here, we'll see our zip file, which we can delete now, but we'll also see the extracted file. And one of the things to note about these extracted files in this particular format is what we're looking for. If we come in models, we're looking for this DAE, this file with this DAE extension, and that's really what we're looking for. But what's a little bit tricky about these is you'll notice there's a bunch of other items in there. There's a text document and a KML and images folder, which provides the textures. You need to keep all of these together. So like before, where I was talking about how, look, when you add an icon or an overlay, you need to make sure that that image stays put so that Google knows where to find it. It's the same thing with these, except when you move these to a location, make sure they're all together. If I were to move this DAE file somewhere else, then I would still be able to import it, but Google Earth wouldn't know where to find the textures and things like that. So to import it, importing really could not be simpler with Google Earth. All we're going to do is we're going to left click it, and we're going to drag it on in there. And when we do that, well, we've got our Imperial Walker. We can move it, we can resize it, just like we do everything else. And so that looks pretty good, so I'm just going to click OK. And now we've got our Imperial Walker in there. I have not, as of yet, prosecuted a case involving an Imperial Walker, but who knows? Probably just a matter of time, right? So anyway, 3D objects. You can certainly get these offline, as I showed. I did throw some in the resources folder. If you come into models, oh, I got the Imperial Walker in there already. I've thrown some other models in there, and you can see I've, for example, officer running is how I described that. Images of people are also in there, and I've titled those. You can find most of these on Google's 3D warehouse. Models like this particular one I've modified a little bit. You can see he's actually, if you look really closely, actually wearing a BPD uniform. And the same thing with these patrol cars here. You won't find these patrol cars on Google's 3D warehouse. You'll find the general shape and size of them, but the textures I added myself, and they're all in this resource folder, so you can just grab them and work with them. And again, I'll do another series in a bit that teaches you how to modify these, how to change the textures, how to build your own models, and that way you can build buildings and things like that. And simple structures like buildings, as long as you don't get too carried away, are really pretty straightforward for the purposes of what we're doing. Obviously, you can put landscaping and trees and stuff in there like that if it's important to your particular case, or an Imperial Walker, for that matter.
Okay, before you go nuts with this, a word of caution about using transient or semi-permanent 3D objects in your Google Earth, like, well, people is what I have in mind. If you're creating static images and you want to use people in there, not for use during the evidentiary phase of your case, generally speaking. This is something that you want to use in closing argument after a witness has already established where an individual was standing or a person was. Maybe an opening statement, but I would absolutely stay away from using this in an evidentiary phase of your case, putting a witness in a position where they're going to have to say that they were standing, in a particular place that you've got that figurine located in Google Earth. You can use, three-dimensional images representing non-fixed objects like people in your case in chief, but it's a complicated affair. I'm going to get into it in a future tutorial. But for now, if you're new to Google Earth, new to this stuff, I would absolutely stay away from using people in any kind of static exhibit whatsoever. Use it in your closing argument after it's been established that people were at the locations that you've got them in the exhibits.
So anyway, I think I've covered sort of the things that I set out to in this. The last thing that I want to do is just show you, okay, how do we, if we're not quite ready to actually use the Google Earth interface in the courtroom, how do we at least use this to make exhibits? And this is what I did for years after I started using Google Earth, well before I ever got the courage to actually use Google Earth in the courtroom. I was using it just to create demonstratives and exhibits and stuff like that. And doing that is really, really simple. The first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to View, Show Navigation, and hide our little navigation area over there. The second thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to go up to View and go to Full Screen. I like to use the hotkeys, so you can just hit F11. And then what we want to do is we want to navigate to basically a view that represents what our exhibit should look like, or what we want our exhibit to look like. And it may be something far out or close in. And there are a bunch of different ways that we can create an exhibit. One way is we can just come up to the file and we can go to print, and we want to go print a screenshot of the current 3D view. And if we go to print, it will bring up our traditional print dialog box. I don't recommend that you do it this way. I just think when you print it this way, there's a little admonition at the bottom that says this is from Google Earth, and it gives you a little scale and stuff, and it just kind of looks cruddy. I don't really like to do it that way. Instead, what I like to do is come up to File and go to Save, and instead of Save Place or My Places, you're just going to go to Save Image. And when you do that, it'll give you the option to save it someplace. So we're just going to pick a location, our training folder, Google Earth, and we're going to save that. And when we do that, we will notice when we navigate there that it has created a PNG image, and that is not it. A JPEG image that represents our view of that particular area. What we can do then is we can either send that out to Jim Ray and have him make a larger exhibit for us. We could send it to the printer ourselves and create just an 11.5 by 8.5 by right-clicking on it and coming to Print, and then which will bring up a print dialog, and selecting our printer or whatever and sending it to the printer that way. Or preferably, what you can do is use a computer in court and a projector, and then just show it to the jury on the big screen, which I think is the preferable way to do it. So anyway, that's the extent of what I wanted to cover in this series. Hope that has been helpful, and thanks for watching.